Caleb Morgan had a secret. It was the reason why he hated the world, and it was the reason why his life was in shambles. But one night, Caleb was ready to tell the whole world about his secret by putting a bullet through his head.
The man that did this to me, he invited me and my brother to go to karate. The guy would actually pull into a parking lot and, and he would rape me.
Caleb Morgan was just 7 years old when he was molested by a member of the church where his father was a pastor.
He did this 4 different times. And then, he'd have a cigarette and usually put out the cigarettes, somewhere on my body.
This was the first in a series of events that turned Caleb against Christians and against God. He kept his abuse a secret for over a decade as he tried to cope with the trauma.
My whole life I grew up, something's wrong with me, I don't know what. I never felt safe enough to share it at church, to be honest with you.
Caleb often felt judged at church for being different.
I actually used to have a little earring in my left ear. I even had one guy pull me aside and tell me I would go to hell if I didn't, take out the earring. And of course, at that time I was younger, I believed him.
He tried to bury the memory of the rape, but he couldn't. By the time he was a teenager, it manifested in a number of self-destructive behaviors.
At the age of 15, I just, one night just started cutting my wrist, just randomly. I wrote a note, kind of like a goodbye note, if you will. I had no idea to why I was actually doing it.
Caleb saw a counselor, but it did little good.
Started using drugs by, 18, 19.
Caleb was often filled with anger, but it was not always toward the people who had mistreated and abused him.
I had a lot of hate for a long time, but most of my hate was directed towards God. And there were even times I didn't believe in God, but I still had hate for him.
After high school, Caleb began a career in the music business as an artist manager. Drugs were a big part of this gig and began to control his life. Then one evening, he reached a breaking point.
I said, God, if you exist, show me, because I'm coming to find out one way or another.
Caleb owned a revolver for protection. One night, he pulled it out of his drawer, intending to commit suicide.
I can remember the cold of the stainless steel, the barrel, and even some type of gunpowder in my mouth. And I put the gun in my mouth and I, pull back the hammer.
He remembers squeezing the trigger and hearing a loud noise. But the gun never fired.
I just got this really loud knock at the door, and it kind of startled me. It was my father. My father never really, I never had my family come up to my place. Having him show up was just really random, super, super random. He could see something was wrong, and so he came in. And that was finally where I pretty much laid out the whole story.
Caleb knew he needed help and admitted himself to a psychiatric clinic.
I'm 24, and, what do I have to show for it? Some plaques from some bands. I had nothing.
While he was there, his father brought him a gift.
My dad gave me this book, Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, and I was just like, yeah, right, I'm going to read it, I can't even barely see straight.
The book's opening line, "It's not about you," caught his eye, and Caleb began pouring through it.
I stayed in my room every single day, 24 hours. I wouldn't go out and eat. I wouldn't, they'd come and give me my medicine. They say, you need to come eat. I just wouldn't. I stayed in that room 24 hours for several days and just cried and cried and cried.
In that tiny room, Caleb finally surrendered to God.
I finally said, okay, what do you want? I'm giving my life to you. There's no point in living it my way. It's a dead-end path. I had to lose myself really to regain anywhere. It's kind of like, when you're at the bottom, there's no place to go but up, but I had been past the bottom.
Caleb wrote a book about his experiences and coming to the end of himself.
I had to go through hell to better understand heaven and to understand God. I think for most of us, we have to lose things most dear to us for us to wake up. After everything I went through, when I had no more energy, I had no more life in me, I had nothing, I just felt God, breathe back, his life into me.
Caleb believes God spared him the night he tried to commit suicide. When he later examined the gun, he saw that the bullet had a dimple where the firing pin had hit it, and the gun had misfired. Caleb also eventually forgave the man who raped him.
I did forgive the man that did what he did. I think that time where God's on the cross, he says, forgive them, they know not what they do. And if he's able to do that to them, with them, then I should be able to say the same. And I don't have any anger at all towards him or God. Bad things happen. That's a reality of life. But it's what we do with those bad things that matter.
Today, he no longer doubts that there's a purpose for his life.
A lot of us don't think we're here for a purpose, but we are. We really do have a purpose being here. I got to the point where, God, this is about you. It's not about me. None of this is about me. This story is not about me. It's to further God's kingdom.
The whole thing is all about him. It's hard to get to that place when bad things have happened to you and your focus is pretty much on your own woundedness, your own anger, your own bitterness. That's where Caleb was in the beginning. Understandably, some horrible things were done to him. He's at a place today where he can put it all in perspective and say, bad things do happen. That's true too. It's part of life. It does happen. But it's not how God intended it to be. He created us to live in a garden with him. And then we chose to step out of our alignment with him and do our own thing. And it brought all kinds of things into our world, into our lives, that God never intended for us to have to deal with or be exposed to. What I love about Caleb's story is when he says, I'm not angry with this man. I'm not angry with God. But he used to be. How did that change for him? Because he asked God, if he was real, to show him. And as God began to reveal that to him, he came to the end of himself. And he was willing to say, I'm done doing this my way. Can't do it anymore. It doesn't work my way. So God, if you can say, I forgive to those who did to you what they did on the cross, then I can say, I forgive too. Sometimes you have to take that step before you feel the lack of anger, before you feel the lack of bitterness. When you offer forgiveness, something changes in your heart. There's a freedom that comes with that. God doesn't ask us to forgive because he's trying to put us through some spiritual gymnastics. He asks us to forgive because there's a freedom and a release that comes with it. So today, if you find yourself in the same place that Caleb was, bound up, angry, bitter, resentful, feeling like your life has no meaning, like you're hopeless, feeling destructive about your own life, I challenge you today to pray what he prayed. God, if you're real, show me. But do it with the heart that's willing to follow his way for once. Not yours, not the instinct that comes out of that bitterness or that anger, but obedience to what God is asking you to do. It's a whole different way of living, but it's a great, great adventure. Will you embark on that today? It begins by inviting him into your heart, acknowledging that he's there and saying, God, I've done it all my way, not working. I want you today. Will you pray with me and invite him into your heart and life? Just stop what you're doing. Now let's pray right now, this moment. There's no better time than the present. Pray with me. God, I'm listening to Caleb's story, and I want to know the kind of freedom he's found. You know all the stuff in my background, all the junk that's happened, all the wrong choices I've made, all the efforts I've made that have been futile to try and make my life matter. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. I am saying, I trust you. I want to know you. I want you to come into the center of me. I want you to take my life and make it count for something that truly matters. I'm asking you to forgive my sins. Forgive my anger, my bitterness, my resentment, my disobedience, my rebelliousness. Will you please forgive it all? God, you know each